Good morning, Deb.
So, ask your question about Mark.
So when I read Mark, you asked last week, was there a difference between of the three? Now I think, what was there a difference? Did you notice a difference? Yes, because Matthew starts out with genealogy. Luke starts out with this big long genealogy. Basically, they're the same, but a little different. Abraham and Adam. They kind of went
Right.
direction, but they did a genealogy. You go to Mark, you open it up right off the bat. Mark's Peter. This is Peter.
Most people affirm that, yes.
And he, to me, when this started out, in the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, as it is written in Isaiah the prophet, what does it say? Well, let's just stop right there. That's enough right there to,
So
how
according
do I
to,
want to say it? This is an attitude to me.
first of all, you got to understand, according to history, John Mark, who
John
was
Mark,
a
yes.
traveling companion of Paul for a short while, got in trouble, went home. Paul said, "I got no use for you." While he was home, he, according to church history and tradition, he started, instead of being discipled by Paul, he started being discipled by Peter. The Apostle Peter. And this is Peter's story for most people. But Mark wrote this not to a Jewish audience. Most people say he wrote it to the Herodians, which were the ruling people in Israel at the time, King Herod and his family and those leaders. In some of the Gospels, you hear the name, or you read the name Junia. She was an official in Herod's court. Her husband was an official, so she was there all the time, inside person. So probably Peter told the story, Mark wrote it down, and Junia got it into the palace of Israel. So consequently, if that's the audience, they're not Jews. They're actually Edomites. They're actually cousins of the Jewish people. They might have some Jewish blood in them. You know, they're descended from Lot's line, not Abraham's line. But that's why a lot of the Jews didn't like them, because they said we shouldn't have a non-Israelite on the throne. But they're still cousins. They're still relatives. And so as you read through Mark's gospel, no genealogy, because it wouldn't have been important to them.
No.
Herod's on the throne. He doesn't have a hereditary right to the throne, so he doesn't care about that. Wouldn't be needed. It's also very action oriented. You know, there's not as much teaching in this. So you're trying to keep a ruling official's attention. You're not going into depths, because Herod liked John's teaching. He doesn't need more teaching. And then on top of it, you'll notice Mark is really kind to the rulers. Now, he is kinder than the other three gospels. He's nicer about it. He doesn't cut them any slack, you know, in the crucifixion and things like that, but he's nicer about it, because again, your audience is the people who were behind the thing. So, and so that's why you have, right from the beginning, he starts with the fact that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God.
But that forms an attitude, because you don't have the Jewish people liking that. You don't have Rome liking that.
Correct.
So you've got right off the bat, they're like, the hair is raised on the back of their neck. So they're paying attention.
But he also wasn't talking to Rome or to the Jews. He's talking to an outside middle management political party that's on thin ice anyway. So
they're so this is a different book than the other two, to me. Well, yeah, you can see even later on, as we get into where we're supposed to be, you're going to see that genealogy is
It doesn't really
It
matter.
doesn't matter. That's where your baptism kind of comes in real quick on that. I know we spent too much time on it yesterday or last time, but when you're baptized, you go into a community. That's your community. That's your life.
If
from now
done
on.
well, if done correctly,
Yes,
that's what baptism is.
it's your community now. Everyone, and you see that when I was reading the other day that who's your brothers and sisters? My brothers and sisters are my community. I was baptized into this community. That's the road I've taken.
It's your union card, it's your marriage certificate, it's your whatever you want to call it. Baptism was, I was one way this moment, after this event, I'm something different.
Something different. And that's where the saying, I've read this several times in different things. That's where water is thicker than blood.
That's what, and then it got reversed.
Yeah.
For the people who weren't insiders, they said,
Yes.
well, blood is thicker.
Blood is thicker than water, but water is thicker than blood in bed. Yeah.
For those of us who are believers, realistically, yes. And all of that plays into where we start today, because we started this week at the beginning of chapter 4. And all of this does play in. It didn't do us, it wasn't really a diversion, because we need to realize that as we're going into Jesus's teaching. So Mark 4, last Friday's readings was 1 through 20. So I'll read that whole section and then we'll talk about it. So again, Jesus began to teach by the lake. The crowd that gathered around him was so large that he got into a boat and sat in it on the lake while all the people were along the shore at the water's edge. He taught them many things by parables, and in his teaching said, listen, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants, so that they did not bear grain. Still other seed fell on good soil. It came up, grew, and produced a crop, multiplying 30, 60, or even 100 times. Then Jesus said, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. When he was alone, the 12 and the others around him asked him about the parables. He told them, the secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to those on the outside, everything is said in parables, so that they may be ever seeing, but never perceiving, and ever hearing, but never understanding. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven. Then Jesus said to them, don't you understand this parable? How then will you understand any parable? The farmer sows the word. Some people are like seeds along the path where the word is sown. As soon as they hear it, Satan comes and takes away the word that it was sown in them. Others, like seeds sown on rocky places, hear the word and at once receive it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. Still others, like seeds sown among thorns, hear the word. But the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. Others, like seeds sown on good soil, hear the word, accept it, and produce a crop, 30, 60, or even 100 times what was sown. So, what do you notice? What question does it make you want to ask? First of all, do we know where this is at?
Are they,
We don't have an exact location, but we know that he has been in northern Israel and that region of Capernaum. And it says very clearly he's by the lake. So more than likely, we're talking the Sea of Galilee.
Sea of Galilee, yeah, that's the lake.
Why would that be important for this parable?
Revelation.
Okay. You're hopping forward, but that's okay on this.
The
Go.
C means chaos.
Mhm.
So every time you see that word C, I'm thinking chaos in the back of my mind. So he's got very large crowds, so he's got to get away from them. Not that he wants to be away from them, but he has to get away because he's starting to have a huge following.
Correct.
And they're coming from all directions, 7 different regions, possibly, when you count it.
Depends on how you read it, yeah.
7 is leave.
Okay,
I have all my revelation back here.
I know, keep going.
So I'm thinking he's there too, to be close to Herod in a way. Because I think he's nudging him.
So what you said about the sea is very true. I said this last night in Genesis. Settings means things in scripture. For the Jewish people, water was synonymous with chaos. Think back to Genesis in the beginning, and the Spirit was hovering over the waters, and there was a formlessness and a void. When storms come, the ocean just swallows its victims. There's almost rarely is there anything left over. And so you have here Jesus on top of the waters of chaos, speaking truth to the people, right?
Right.
The other side of this is what's going on around them. The Sea of Galilee is a pretty fertile area. A lot of farming going on around them. So he's probably telling them this parable as people are in the fields behind them. It wouldn't just be, he probably wouldn't tell this parable in the middle of winter, for instance, because it would resonate for farmers, but it wouldn't resonate for most people. Do you get what I'm saying? And so you have Jesus on the edge of the water proclaiming this truth, because the passage that is quoted down here in verse 12 really is important. Most people are going to be dealing with the chaos of life, and they're not going to pay attention to the things of God. That little interlude from Isaiah chapter 6 that he quotes there, it's not an interjection. The location, the time of year, the parable, and the quoting of Isaiah all go together to drive the point home. The people who are on the edge probably have the farmers going behind them. Jesus feels like he's out on the water. That most people would see that as not a place where a teacher would want to teach from, because the waters are chaos. Waters are unpredictable. And yet Jesus is over the waters, and he's in control of the waters. And in other places, he controls the water. And so all of this is, well, for lack of a better term, all of it's theatrics to make the point come home. You get what I'm saying? The location, the things going on around them, the sights, the sounds, the smells, all of it is to make this point that some will choose to follow him, and it'll grow a lot of fruit. Most people won't, because they're distracted by everything else.
I was also under the impression that where he was in the location kind of worked like an amphitheater, because there's so many people there where his voice would carry out to them.
When you're out on the water, I've been told this. I haven't gone yet. It's my hope to go. I'm thinking maybe in 27, maybe we can just organize that. But that it works as a natural amphitheater. Your voice will ricochet across the water, and it will hit a larger audience. Same reason that in Matthew's gospel, they call it the Sermon on the Mount. It wasn't really a mount. so much as it was a hill, but he was on top of it speaking down over the people so more people could hear it. In Luke's gospel, I think it calls it the Sermon on the Plain, and it's flat. And of course, that's odd because most of the people in the back probably wouldn't be able to hear it, because the people would actually muffle his words. Unless, of course, he is God and there's all that part of it. So yeah, location matters. The stage and the things going on matter, and they probably speak directly into the distractions that he's even talking about.
I think we read chapter 3 last week.
Mhm.
We didn't discuss it, did we?
Some, but that we had to hurt because we ran out of time. What?
But that's kind of the same way, that you're back into the fields, and actually the disciples that were there with Jesus when they walked through that and they picked up the grain and they were eating it, they were fishermen. So they really wouldn't know that you can't just walk in there and, well, it was a Sabbath though. You don't eat on the Sabbath. They would have known that because they were kosher or whatever. They would know that. But they went ahead and I think he was making a point there too on that. He did something against the Sabbath. And they noticed that right off. Everything he's doing, he's making he's bringing attention to himself. And he goes in and they eat the grain and of course the Pharisees are standing there, you can't do that. This is the Sabbath. And then he brings up David. He said, well, if David went in and did that, King David did, it was okay for King David to do that.
So we didn't discuss that last week, but let's grab that for a second. Why was it okay for David to eat the consecrated bread? You guys know this story? So this is after David has been anointed king, and publicly Samuel, the prophet, told Saul, the mantle has been removed from him. He no longer carries God's blessing. He's still political king, but he is no longer God's king. David's been anointed. Saul's hunting David, trying to kill him. And David is collecting people who support him, but they're all living as, outsiders on the run. And they've run out of supplies and they go to the tabernacle and they're asking for food. Now, first of all, for us, that seems odd, right? Except that you have to understand that originally, if you read Leviticus, every offering that was brought was meant to be eaten by everybody else. There's only one offering out of the six that was not, no one ate. The whole burnt offering, all of that went to God. But all the other offerings that you brought, you cooked it, you prepared it, and you put it on the buffet table that everybody might eat. And so there should have been food there for David and his men. But there was no food there, which meant no one was bringing sacrifices. The food that was left there was the showbread, the 12 loaves of bread that were on the table of the presence in front of the Holy of Holies. Those loaves of bread were meant to represent the 12 tribes being before God. And the people who could eat that bread were the priests. Was David a priest?
No,
Technically, no, but he was.
technically no.
Technically, no, but didn't God say that they were supposed to be a kingdom of priests? See, Jane?
Yes.
All of them were meant to be God's priests. And when you're doing what God has called you to do, you are one of God's priests. Therefore, they would be allowed to eat that bread. Because in the story, the priest actually asked David, are your men clean? Have they abstained from sexual intercourse? Have they done the things He's asking, are you ritually clean? And therefore you can eat this. Because he knows that David is the anointed king, and therefore he knows that David is living within who God has called him to be. And therefore David is acting as a priest. Now, all of that comes into play in the story that you brought up in chapter 3, where they eat the grain on the Sabbath day.
But Jesus is there.
But Jesus is there. They are called by Christ.
Right.
They have been set aside for this task, and they are doing what God has called them to do. And in the Old Testament, it says, don't you understand that the priests desecrate the Sabbath by working on the Sabbath? My job is to work on the day that we worship. I don't get it as a day off. That's not my day off. And so I'm not desecrating the Sabbath by doing that.
Right.
They're not desecrating the Sabbath by doing what Christ has called. And so therefore they can eat. When you're living into God's law, the human law gets set aside.
Right. He was the Messiah, so he was the Son of God. And yeah, obedience was their main
And
goal on the Sabbath.
notice, just before that story, was it just before that?
Well, disobey.
Yes. Just before that, Jesus names them as the 12.
Yes.
So he very clearly names them and appoints them to the work. And so therefore their eating on the Sabbath is no longer against the law.
Well, going against this Sabbath is, I mean, they followed that so closely. Because that's one of the big 10s. That's one of the 10 commandments. So,
Yeah, I see you do.
yeah, well, it is. I mean, it's a big, that was the 10 commandments. So then they abided by that. That was an obedience thing for them. But, so that tells me right there, they still don't realize who he is. They still don't know who Jesus is. They're looking at him like, who are you that you can do this? I think there's still an identity issue. So now we got the 12 apostles and now we're coming back over here. I still don't think they know who he is.
They don't understand
They're
that they're in the fields.
They're following, but I think the identity is still not there.
They're stuck on the legalism.
Yes, they're still playing with the laws and the rules.
They are stuck on the words on the page and not the meaning of the words when they're read together.
Yeah. That's kind of what I would, yeah.
Does that get back up to those have the ears to hear and the eyes to see? They do not have the ears to hear or the eyes to see.
Correct.
Oh, that's a good, yeah.
So
They are looking for what they're wanting to see and hear and experience. They're not looking for what God is giving them to see and hear and experience.
They know the Old Testament. The Jewish people know the Old Testament. They know. So he's a Messiah.
they
He's
know
coming.
the words of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
But they don't know it in their heart.
No, they don't get it yet because they wanted him to come on a big white horse with his army and take Rome down, and everything was going to be fine. And he didn't come in like that. But I think too, this is probably not the right thing to say either. Hope there's not anybody in here. I get my I think sometimes we look at Jesus like he's a nice guy, he loves everyone, and he's good to everyone, and he's very kind. He is very much that way, and that's how he come in to conquer a kingdom with love and not violence, like all the other kingdoms were formed. But he's making a stance here. He's strong. He's in Capernaum for a reason. He's standing right next to Herod. He's saying, go ahead, listen to me. Listen to what I'm doing. I'm coming to make my kingdom. I am the Son of God. He said it in the very first sentence. I'm the son of God. I'm here. I'm going to make this and listen to me. Look at what I'm doing. I'm going to bind Satan. I'm going to they say time up. He's going to bind him. And they're not getting the identity yet, I think.
So one of the things that really shifted for me, my understanding of God, and specifically Jesus, is in 2018, we did read the entire Bible in a year, and we called it the year of there is no BC.
Yeah.
So we were looking for Jesus all throughout the Old Testament. And the clear thing that made that valuable is in John 1:1, it says, Jesus is the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was there from the beginning, and nothing was created except through the Word. And so every time God speaks, that is Jesus. Every time God speaks, that is Jesus. So the same Jesus who's very kind in the Gospels is the exact same Jesus who proclaims 10 plagues on Egypt.
Exactly. I think we have to remember that. I think we don't when we read the Gospels and don't look back at the
And
Old
so
Testament.
you have to, in some ways, in the Gospels, we get God showing us his softer side, but that doesn't diminish his lawful side, his truth side. And so in this parable, Jesus is very clearly saying, there's going to be a lot of people who hear me. They hear me, but they don't listen. They don't understand what I'm saying. And most of the people will not get it. And that's a hard truth to
It
hear.
is hard. But you can see it right here.
I mean, if we were to take this literally and we were to divide all people into one of 5 categories. First of all, you got a whole group of people who never hear him. And they don't even produce anything. Then you take the people who hear him and they're divided into one of 4 categories, 4 different kinds of soil. And the sad reality is, if you divide it evenly, and it's probably not divided evenly, but if you divide it evenly, only 25% of the people who hear Jesus will produce any fruit.
25%.
That's if you divide it evenly.
Yeah. So it's going to be less than that.
It's probably going to be less than 10% of the people who actually hear Jesus do anything with it and produce any fruit.
Where where the grain goes down on the rock.
We're hoping that we're not in that category. Anything else that stood out to you in these first 20 verses? One phrase that stuck out to me this time as I was reading it just now. Verse 10. When he was alone, the 12 and the others around him. I don't think I'd ever paid attention to the and the others around him before. I've always known there were other people with him, but there was more than just the 12.
Yeah, because he had such a following. They had so much zeal. Once they started following, I can see that where there would always be somebody hanging around.
And Jesus had to be okay with them being there, or they wouldn't have been there.
I mean, think about when he dropped the paraplegic or the paralyzed person down through
We
Peter's
discussed that
roof.
last week, yeah.
Yeah, which I bet Peter was thrilled. I thought, you're going to cost me money because they just kind of
He's a fisherman, not a carpenter.
just dropped this stuff down my roof. Okay. But I lost my train. Oh yeah. There were people all around. He was surrounded. It was starting to gather. So yeah, I can see where there might have been, he had the 12, but there was always people around because he was starting a following, but I still don't think they understood.
I hope that I at least get to be one of the others around him.
Yeah,
I doubt I'll ever make it to the inner circle, but I hope that I'm one of the others around. Anything else that stands out to you? Or any other questions? Then let's read Saturday's reading. Mark 4:21 through 32. He said to them, "Do you bring in a lamp to put it under a bowl or a bed? Instead, don't you put it on its stand? For whatever is hidden is meant to be disclosed, and whatever is concealed is meant to be brought out into the open. If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. Consider carefully what you hear," he continued. "With the measure you use, it will be measured to you, and even more. Whoever has been given more, whoever has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him." He also said, "This is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground. Night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. All by itself, the soil produces grain. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. As soon as the grain is ripe, he puts the sickle to it because the harvest has come." Again, he said, "What shall we say the kingdom of God is like? Or what parable shall we use to describe it? It is like a mustard seed, which is the smallest seed you plant in the ground. Yet when planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all garden plants, with such big branches that the birds of the air can perch in its shade." Any questions or thoughts there? Probably the one that stood out to me and kind of is a little frightening is 24, the second half. "With the measure you use, it will be measured to you, and even more."
yeah.
How much effort do we put into this thing? God multiplies what effort we do use, but the effort we don't, and we put into others, can be multiplied as well. Anything else stand out or any questions? Okay. We'll read Sundays 33 through the end of the chapter. "With many similar parables, Jesus spoke the word to them. As much as they could understand, he did not say anything to them without using a parable. But when he was alone with his own disciples, he explained everything. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let's go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind and the waves. 'Quiet, be still.' Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?' They were terrified and asked each other, 'Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey.'" What do you think? Any questions? Any thoughts? Thought just occurred to me as I asked that question. This is the same chapter, right? At the beginning of Mark 4, it says that he was by the lake. So probably all of this is the same day, give or take. Do you think that the choppiness of the sea has any parallels to the kinds of soils that he mentioned earlier. I remember a point, I don't remember how old I was. I was probably upper elementary or something like that, but I was, my home church is a little country church, all kinds of fields all around it. And, there's, watch the farmers every spring, nobody tills anymore. They don't, it's very rare that you see that, but, usually in the spring they'd come and they'd retill it up and you'd see all kinds of rocks and things like that pull out. And then in the spring, they're pulling the rocks from the field so that they can plant. And I just always remember in my head being afraid that I would be one of the other kinds of soil. And so there's this reality here that I think if we ask, God will make us better soil. Just like if we ask, God will calm the waves of the sea. Does that make sense? Now, they did it out of fear, but they could have just as much asked God to calm the waves out of faith. You get what I mean by that? Just a thought that occurred.
There was something else with other faith on faith. I mean, where I thought that kind of faith stepped in. What? Is that something they're gonna have, they're learning too, is to use their faith?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think this is a learning process for the disciples and for the whole, because there was a place, I read it and I thought,
If you find it, we can come back to it.
yeah, if I find it, I'll come back, because I had a question on that, because I thought there was lack of faith there. Because they were learning, I
And-
felt like.
But the other side of it is, let's go back and tie it to 26 through 29. Once the seed takes root, the plant does its thing. I think there's a sense in which God is saying very clearly, Jesus is saying, once faith takes root, it's going to grow.
It will grow no matter.
It's going to do its thing. It's going to do what it does naturally. And for the people who don't let the world take control, the faith that you have will be multiplied. It's going to grow. It's going to come to fruition. God doesn't let things just sit.
He's gonna plow away for you.
He'll make a way. Any other thoughts or questions so far? All right, then we'll jump into the next story. Mark 5, 1 through 20. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. Excuse me. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied. "We are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs and allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, sitting there dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told them about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. So
That's where the other faith is. So there was faith there.
Okay,
The other faith was when he took was in the synagogue.
the man with the withered hand.
Wasn't there a place where the guy was possessed? Or was a leper? He was a leper. And they're all standing back and saying, "No, you do what, why would you touch this guy? Why would you have anything to do? This guy is unclean."
Right.
And that's where that's where, to me, faith come in, that no, have faith in me. I am who I say I am. I will heal him. He does send him off and say, "You need to go through the Jewish ritual, but you are healed from your leprosy." So that put in faith. So on this part then, here you go again. You got someone else's,
Outsider.
an outsider possessed. And can you imagine standing there and watching that and thinking, what's he gonna do? You have to have faith that he can get in there and take this. Take this guy and take the torment out of him, and how's he gonna do it?
You notice,
The pigs were bad for the Jewish people.
so first of all, we are on the east side of the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River. This is a region that was not always a part of Israel. And notice at the end in Mark's gospel, they say it, they make a point that they say that he went all throughout the Decapolis. Decapolis is actually a Greek term. It means 10 cities. Most of these people here were Greek speakers. They might have had some Jewish descent, but they were not practicing Jews. And so, to a certain degree, this man is a symbol of the whole region. They're herding pigs. Pigs are not clean for Jews. Jews should be around them. They go by a Greek name in this region, and this man is living amongst the dead, bound and chained, and cutting himself. These are people who are deeply oppressed. And so, to a certain degree, this man represents the whole region. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is significant because he's saying the whole he's bringing in everything around.
We are legion.
Yes.
We are people of outcasts. You don't really want anything to do with us. Why are you here to torture us? Because what would happen between Jews and non-Jews? They'd start bickering at each other.
Right. Conflict.
At its nicest level. Kind of like me and Bears fans until last week. But there's a sense in which this story is an outflow of what Jesus just said before. He is scattering seed to grow faith. And so this is, for all practical purposes, this is him storming the beach of Normandy. This is enemy territory. These are not Jewish people. They should be. Do you know, this region used to be called, in the Old Testament, they called it Bashan. The hills of Bashan. It was a very fertile area. A lot of farmers and ranchers and shepherds. This was also the same area where Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh settled on the eastern side of the Jordan River. These should be godly people, but they're living a Greek identity. They're herding pigs. They're living amongst the dead. They're bound to their chain. Do you see all that?
Mhm. And here he goes again. I'm bringing attention. I'm coming into this area. I'm gonna clean it up. I'm gonna bring these people in, no matter who they are, against the Jews, because they're nothing that the Jewish people have anything to do with, but I'm going to go in. This is the attitude you see at the very first sentence of Mark. Again, he's going in no matter what.
When I used to really struggle with how he tells this man that we don't get his name. We don't get the name, but he tells him to stay and go and tell your family. As man, I would have wanted to go with Jesus.
Yeah.
And yet later on, and I don't remember if it does this in Mark's gospel, but I know it does in the others. When Jesus returns to this area, the people are now ready to experience what God has in store.
So he made his point.
He made his point.
He spread his seed
And it multiplied.
and it multiplied. So there's the answer.
Sometimes we have to allow God to use us, and we have to be willing to be the example. And that's not always easy. To be most of us all grew up in Christian homes. And, we had at least a moderate Christian influence. But it's really hard when you're the first generation believer. It's really hard. And we kind of take it for granted that we grew up in the faith. We don't realize what that afforded to us. And even if your people were only nominal Christians, or maybe they were Christmas and Easter kind of Christians, or whatever it might be, that's still far better than no faith.
Nothing. Have you thought about the disciples in that? Have you thought about that, what they did? Well, in that culture, you live by honor and shame. And you think about that. So Jesus walked up, they're sitting out on the lake or the sea, and and he says, follow me. And they do that. That would be hard to do in that culture because you're leaving your family. They left Zebedee sitting in the boat and they walked away, and I'm thinking, can you imagine doing that? Especially in that culture?
So the closest example I can think of to this is, and please hear me, I'm not trying to throw mud or shade at people, but to a certain degree, it was both culturally acceptable to follow teachers like this, but you need to be cautious. You need to make sure that you are yoking yourself to the right horse.
Yeah.
And the closest example I can think of is growing up it's a lot like Amway was. Do you remember Amway? Be glad.
Pyramids.
Amway was a pyramid scheme.
Oh,
Where the more people you got involved in it, the better your pricing was. It was kind of like Sam's Club and Costco, but it was all mail order. And so the more people you got involved in the organization, the deeper your discount got. And it
His grandpa used to sell it. Grandpa used to sell it.
did he? Did not know that.
So it's okay.
It's kind of like Avon, but you don't get any discounts.
You know, there were
What are they selling? I just don't even understand.
everything.
Everything.
It was anything you can get at Walmart now, you could have gotten through Amway. They had their own cleaning products, they had their own clothes, they had
Vitamins.
furniture, vitamins,
Yeah, everything.
everything.
It was almost a cult. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like,
It-
yeah, it was. My grandpa did that too. Yeah.
It bore,
He was a dealer, some level.
and
It still exists.
it doesn't,
Does it really? Wow, I didn't know that.
to some people, it really was almost a cult like.
Mhm.
Now, I know some people who just took advantage of the financial benefits and they just made the most of it. And for them, it was, they didn't necessarily get, sign a whole bunch of other people up, but they just, now, I mean, for us today, if I was going to do that, I'd just drive to Evansville and go to Sam's Club, and it's probably not really any different,
No.
But there was a lot of things like that in the 70s and 80s and 90s where, they tried to get people in, and the more people you got involved, the better it was for you. But a lot of that, we now look back on it and say, it was kind of a cult.
Yeah. What were we thinking? Yeah.
What were we thinking? Now, some, in the same kind of vein, I remember the first time I heard about investing in penny stocks. And they used to really try and get people to just start small. Now, the thing of it is they weren't lying. You could make a whole lot of money in that. I remember the first time I was told that you could buy stock in things like Pepsi and Nintendo and Apple. And most people are like, there's no money in that. And then, of course, then there's people who now I wish
Walmart.
Walmart.
I can remember when Walmart's like,
I have Walmart's.
yeah, I wouldn't have it.
I had Walmart
Yeah.
stock when I worked for them, and I
Yeah.
probably wish I would have kept it, but that's what got us through when I answered the call in the ministry and I started,
Yeah.
going back to school full time. But I say all that to say there are things even in our culture where we look at and we're like, that's a little shady, right? But yet for some people, it actually becomes a really good thing, and a lot of good comes of it. And so that same cultural acceptance and pushing away is true of what it was in following Jesus. There were lots of traveling rabbis, and most people would look at me like, yeah, no, I'm just going to do my daily thing. But some of them did great things.
I'd say that some of the followers of Jesus was probably some of John the Baptist.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that some of them of the 12 wasn't with Thomas or some of those. Part of those, I can't remember.
It doesn't really say. You can build a case from scripture that Andrew might have been a
Yeah,
disciple
Andrew.
of John the Baptist before he became a disciple of Jesus, but the rest of them.
It was Andrew, not Thomas, yeah. Yeah, you're just, probably straws for there, but I was just kind of wondering, but I just thought that when I first looked at the disciples, I thought, that's a big jump, especially for Matthew too. I mean, if Matthew, he's gonna come in with those guys, they're gonna hate him. They're gonna want to lynch him the minute he gets in there. because of who he was. Tax collector, you couldn't have got worse.
So any other thoughts? We got 30 minutes and 3 days worth of readings to try and get through.
Okay.
But I don't want to shut down any questions if we got it. 21 through 34 then. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue rulers named Jairus came there. Seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him. My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowded against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." So what do you notice, or what questions did I ask?
Faith, again. She had faith that she could get up to him and touch him.
Do you notice a posture here? In verse 33, she came and fell at his feet.
Oh, yes, yeah.
In verse 22, and Jairus, he fell at his
Fell at
feet.
his feet, yeah.
The beginning of chapter 5, verse 6, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him.
They're starting to see.
There is a posture of submission and realization that I can't do it on my own.
Right.
Falling before him, pleading. I wonder how many more miracles we might see if people were that desperate. Or do we just come to God standing in front of him face to face saying, "Why don't you heal me?" You get what I'm saying by that? The posture often when the Pharisees and the Sadducees are coming to, they stand in front of it. When the people that Jesus heals, they fall,
Oh,
they kneel.
They stand in front of them, and they're being confrontational.
yes.
Anything else or any other thoughts? This section from 25 through 34 as a whole is a good reminder for me, and why I say that I'm grateful we live in the United States, where we have hospitals and all these things that are easy access, but I'm reminded they just practice medicine. They know what generally works. And I'm thinking in particular right now, you're a prime example, Rick. Over the last couple of weeks, I've reminded people that people that have that Irish Gaelic background usually redheads. They say you take anesthesia differently, you handle pain differently. And we learned because of your experience, you don't even manifest a heart attack or a stroke the way everybody else does. They think they know. They've created patterns. They can predict most of the time, but I don't think that the doctors she went to here that it lists were quacks. They were probably very well-respected people who knew what they were doing, but even their understanding was limited. I'm grateful for doctors and nurses and hospitals and medicine and, surgeries and all these things. I'm grateful for it, but it only goes so far.
So I have to tell you a funny story about that.
Okay.
So I had surgery 2 years ago or so. Yeah, I think about 2 years. And the doctor he said, you're going to be a problem. This is going to be a difficult surgery. Okay. So the morning and I went in, so I prayed all night long. Because I was worried about it, because he kind of scared me by saying that. So when I went in that morning, and he was a wonderful doctor in Evansville, he was a specialist that they brought in, and I patted him, he put his hand on me, and I patted his hand, and I said, I have all the faith in the world in you. And he said, oh, honey, he said, don't put it with me. And when he said that, I've always thought about that, because I told Tom later when I come home after surgery, I go, that really made me feel good to go in there. But he said that, don't put it in me, because I'm only going to do what I can do. You're going to have higher than that. So, but, and the surgery was a success. Because of higher than that, I'm sure, but, yeah, I think you don't think about, or you do think about that. I did think about that. That's the first thing I thought of when they told me I had to have it. I thought, I'm going to have to go beyond here, because this is not going to look fun. So, but yeah, when he said that, and maybe sometimes we need to be reminded of that you do that. It's interesting, because we were talking in our Sunday school class the other day. When you go to Mount Carmel to Justin Miller, Dr. Miller down there, before every surgery, any surgery that Todd had on his knees and stuff like that, he says, we need to pray. We're going to pray about this. Before he does any surgery, he prays. He prays with you. And I thought, that makes you feel good. I always, and there was a guy the other day that had surgery, and he didn't know that Justin did that. And he said, you know what that guy said to me? He said, before we did the surgery, he said, he come in and he said, I would like to pray with you. I would like to pray before I go into surgery. And he goes, I said, that's good. And this was a person that doesn't go to church. And so, that, yeah, there's a lot to this.
Is he with Wabash?
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk to you after this.
Yeah.
Looking for a surgeon for James to do his shoulder again.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's at Wabash.
We got 12 minutes left. So I'm going to read the last two sections, and then at least we make sure we've read them all together, and we'll see. So I'm going to read from Mark 5:35 through 6:13. So while Jesus was still speaking, some men came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? Ignoring what they said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, don't be afraid, just believe. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue ruler, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and he went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up and walked around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Where did this man get these things? They asked. What's the wisdom that has been given him? That he has done, he even does miracles. Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, only in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his own house is a prophet without honor. He could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And that he was amazed at their lack of faith. Then Jesus went around teaching from village to village, calling the 12 to him. He sent them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over evil spirits. These were his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra tunic. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave as a testimony against them. They went out and preached that the people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. So, any thoughts or questions? Anything you want to discuss?
So they drove out, they gave up everything they had. Only wore the tunic that they,
Well,
it's telling us something.
there's a level of trust there. Pragmatically speaking, I heard an old guy in one of my churches say, the other side of that is that means that Jesus didn't send them very far. You can go pretty far if you know you're still close to the one who's going to provide everything. I don't know if that's true, but that was his perspective on it.
Could be.
Anything else?
See, they talk about that again. The prophet is not without honor, except in his house with his relatives. I think this honor and shame thing still rides around in the background too. You notice they're not talking about Joseph anymore.
It's pretty clear Joseph is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know why, don't know how. Most people say that somewhere between the age of 12 and when Jesus started his ministry, he passed.
Maybe 20, 12 and 20, 20, 12 and 30. What could that be?
We don't really know.
I don't think it's like he's not insignificant, but I just think that that's not an important part maybe of this.
He filled a role for a
Right.
season,
Right.
and that's important. And there's a number of people in our lives who fulfill a role for a season. They're not necessarily someone who journeys with us for the entire thing, length of the journey, but yeah.
Yeah, I picked that up back on chapter 3 or whatever. I thought they mentioned his mother and his brothers and sisters, but no Joseph. And I thought, okay, he's gone now. He may have been older too. I don't think we even know that.
So depending on tradition, the Catholic Church says that Joseph was married before, And the people who are listed here were from his first marriage. So they were Jesus's stepbrothers.
Yeah, I think I had heard that because
And-
Father Mike, yeah.
And so that's how they augment and bridge that gap between Jesus's mother being a virgin and staying a virgin. And them calling them brothers. Some people have said that the word here, actually, it means relative. Not necessarily, it doesn't mean close relative, it just says part of the family. So these could be cousins as much as brothers. I think that one's a little bit more of a stretch.
Well, and also that kind of explains too, if the father died, let's say between 12 years old and 20, to Stephen. I'm assuming he may have been the oldest in the household. He would have taken care of the household that would have been customary for him to take care of that household for some.
From the age of 14 or so, once he became a man,
In the
forward
church, in the Jewish
in the Jewish faith
synagogue.
community,
Yeah,
he would have then become the man of the household. So probably sometime between 12 and 14 or 15, Joseph probably passed.
because we kind of had a law time.
Now, interestingly, do you know why we tend to say that Jesus started his ministry at the age of 30?
No, why did we say that?
It's an assumption based on the Old Testament understanding that a priest didn't start until they were 30,
Okay.
but then they retired by the age of 50. You were only really allowed to serve as a priest for 20 years. Now, the interesting thing is in the other gospels, when it mentions Zechariah, it implies he is older than 50,
Yeah, old. I thought.
which meant he should not have been serving in the temple, which goes to show another level of the corruption of the temple, that they were pulling in old priests to do things when they should have just been doing it themselves. But the reason we tend to think that Jesus started around age 30 is because that's the age in which a Jewish man who is in the line of the priesthood could start serving as a priest.
I'm assuming, and Mark, and I don't know this, I'm assuming we're looking at 60s to 90s, 60 to, has a Jewish revolt happened?
Most people would say that Mark was written before AD 70. In 70, Jerusalem was sacked and destroyed. And that if that had already taken place when this was written down, there are other things that they would have talked about and that it would have reflected that. I tend to believe that at least all three of the synoptic gospels were written before AD 70.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought it was. That's why I said 50, 60. Because sometimes I would swing back. So I can't think when the Jewish revolt was. That would have been
70.
70, okay. So they may have lost some Pharisees and priests and stuff then, because after that, didn't they get rid of the Sadducees and?
Well, the Sadducees that whole sect was tied to temple worship.
Yeah,
And so without the temple worship, they would have just kind of drifted off.
dissipated, or if they killed them off in that Jewish revolt,
Could have.
because Josephus, he's turncoat. He went to the Romans. I can help you with this, don't cut my head off.
So if you don't know who that is, Josephus is one of the primary sources outside of scripture to know what happened at this time in human history. He was
That then,
he was
that probably,
he was a born Jewish.
Yeah.
Um,
General.
and he joined up with the Romans, but he also kind of, as a side note, he was a historian. So he wrote a lot of the history of that day from a Roman perspective. So he's favorable to the Jewish people, but he's also favorable to the Roman government. And so he does mention Christ in his history, but he just kind of mentions it more as a paragraph footnote in amongst everything else.
In the way,
What?
in the way, he was probably in the way. See, I always thought, I don't know where I picked all that up at. I thought he was like the Jew, when they had the Jewish revolt, he was a general on the Jewish side, but then he got captured.
I don't know the whole story there, so.
Yeah, and then he turned. I always called him a turncoat then.
He might have been. I just know that I've got copies of his historical records in my office, and that's one of the strongest extra biblical sources that kind of prove a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. I must have went down a rabbit hole somewhere, found that.
Well, in the era of the internet, it's easy to go down a lot of rabbit holes.
I like the history, so I always like to go back and look. I always like to look where they're at and what was going on at that time. Because it kind of helps you if you have the genre and the context, it kind of
It
helps
does.
you understand. And that's where I picked up a lot of the cultural things. I'm thinking, wow, this is hard on these people.
There are three big sources. Josephus, Eusebius, and I can't remember the third one right now. So they're mass printed and you can get copies of them. Eusebius is written, I think, somewhere around 1800, 800, 180, 280, somewhere in that area. And so he's writing from a Christian history perspective. You get a lot of church history there, but he writes about it. So you're talking about somebody who's less than 150 years after the fact. You know.
Yeah.
But any final thoughts? Next week, we will read Mark 6:14 through Mark 8, verse 10. So let's pray. Lord, it's been a journey. And like so many of these others, we heard lots of things. But Lord, we pray that we might hear what you want us to hear, that our hearts might be fertile soil for you. And Lord, that we will not let the things of this life distract us from what you seek to do in us. Lord, send us out to bear witness to you in the world, so that the world might know you because of our lives. We thank you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. And thank you, Deb.